Welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. Today we are continuing our career and Duncan Kerman here is going on a grand adventure. Ever since he was a child, he was always looking in the skies at this mysterious green dot of Jool and was wondering, what's there? How can he get there and what treasures there might be? So, when Kerbal Space Program announced that they are sending a probe or manned craft on a grand tour of all Jool's moons, Duncan Kerman was the first to apply and was the only actually volunteer. Everybody else was, "Oh no, it's going to take too long. We won't have enough snacks. There will be no explosions." But Duncan Kerman was set. His goal was clear. He will go to the Jool, will go around all of its moons and get all the science that he can. And here we are approaching the Jool. So let's time warp quickly to the lower orbit, because we've already done the high orbit science. And as you can see, we only have gravioli detector and the thermometer to get our science, because of course we could have taken science juniors and goo containers, but that would require to take along also a lab, and I prefer to travel light. So let's circularize around Jool and let's see what we can do from here. We can encounter Leif if we do this little maneuver at our apopsis. So let's do that and I'll see you in the approach to Leif. Let's do the high orbit science around the Leif. Let's time warp to periapsis. And let's do the low orbit science. And as we are approaching, our velocity is changing due to the gravity of Leif. And we are going to get into much lower orbit around the Jool after we exit the sphere of influence of Leif. So let's see what is going to happen. Here we are. Now our apopsis is now lower than the pole orbit. And if we do this, placing maneuver nodes behind in our orbit, we see the future orbits and that we will have encounter with Tyler in 2 orbits around the Jool. So let's see if we can correct this encounter. That looks good. And let's time warp until we find this node. The first orbit is done and we get premature encounter. Well, faster the better. So let's correct this one. Get into the lower periapsis. And as it happens, if we go for this encounter, we will also encounter Val after this one. Even better. Let's time warp to our maneuver node and execute it. Perfectly done. And now we can continue with our time warp into the sphere of influence of Tyler. Let's get close to it. First let's do the science in high orbit. And as we have the custom Biomes mod, we can get a little bit more science from the gravioli detector, because it works for every biome regardless of the altitude. So let's grab all the science. And let's see if maybe we can get a little bit more. No, I don't think I've actually done it here. So let's correct our approach to Val. And yes, let's see if we can get a little bit more science from Tyler. Yes, we can. we travel through 2 other biomes, and we can get a little bit more from the graviole detector. Let's check if we can get a little bit more. Nope, doesn't look like it. So let's... Oh, we got a little bit more. Perfect. So now we are going to time warp out of the sphere of influence of Tylo, constantly checking for more signs. And let's go for our encounter with Val. First of all, we need to create this maneuver node and change our periapsis. That looks good. So let's time warp to the node and execute it. That is good enough for us. So let's time warp into sphere of influence of Val and do the same thing as we done with Tylo and Leif. Get the high orbit signs, just like that. Time warp closer to periapsis and get the low orbit signs. Here we go, low orbit signs from Val. All the EVA reports, graviole reports and temperature reports. And again, we are checking if there are more biomes around us, so if we can get even more signs, but it doesn't look that way. So now we only have 2 moons left on our list. The first one is Bob and the second one is Paul. So let's see if we can get encounter with the Paul. First of all, we need to raise our orbit around the Jool so that we intersect the Paul's orbit, and then we do some fiddling with the orbit and we get this encounter. I've cut it out because it took approximately 20 minutes of just fiddling with maneuver nodes back and forth, and that's not really interesting to watch. And apparently 37 kilometers above Paul is not enough to get into the low orbit. Who knew? Okay, let's continue then to the last point of our mission, Bob. So we're doing a little bit of fiddling with our maneuvers, and here we are on our approach. Well, we're not yet on approach, we are still doing the maneuver node. Let's hope that 24 kilometers is enough to get into the low orbit. Time warp into the node, executing this node, and time warping again to get into the sphere of influence of the planet. Oh, the moon. It's not actually a planet. It's not even a moon if you look at it. It is so small, so it's probably just an asteroid. So let's do the usual things. High orbit signs. And let's try to get the low orbit signs. And it is a little bit tricky. We only managed to get 1 crew report. We were not there long enough to get anything else. And that was the last moon of Jool system. So now we can try and return home. Let's create our usual maneuver that will slow our speed in relation to Jool or in relation to Sun, and will bring our periapsis down to the orbit of Kerbin. And here we are, we have an encounter. So let's time warp to our maneuver and execute it with this burn that took approximately 2 minutes. Perfectly done. And now we have to just time warp out of sphere of influence of Jool and time warp to our encounter. Of course, we've done a little bit of a course correction along the way, but we've seen that too many times to continue showing it on every episode. We are already re-entering the atmosphere, and I was trying to bleed off a little bit of our velocity with the engine before we get the re-entry effects and have to ditch it out. And at that point I was a little bit concerned about possibility of survival of Duncan Kerman, because we were returning from Jool and our velocity was a little bit higher than usual, but we only reached 5 Gs, and that's nowhere near to kill Duncan Kerman. So let's pop our parachute and see what we brought home. And we brought 5100 science. Wow, that is enough to unlock both fusion power node and particle accelerators node. That will allow us to get even better nuclear reactors, fusion reactors, and do the antimatter research, which is going to prove useful, at least as I remember. We also got a little bit of science to get aviation tech, which we haven't actually used in this series at all, and might start using in future episodes. But for now, thank you all for watching. Remember to like, dislike and comment this video in the section below. My name is Darlock, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.